it could be a very lively start to the year. There's plenty going on in the South China Sea at the moment, and particularly in the first quarter tends to be a busy time. The exercises that China's carrying out with its first aircraft carrier off Hainan in the South China Sea, those are being very, very closely watched. We've already seen one near miss with a US warship. There could be more. Various analysts are warning about being very, very wary of future close calls. The aircraft carrier isn't fully operational. It's not even fully armed, I would say. But nonetheless, it's a great symbol of what China is planning for its Navy. It wants to be able to project full blue water capability and by the end of the decade probably have 3 or 4 or 5 aircraft carriers of its own out at sea. Then we've got the new air defence zone that China's created in the East China Sea. That's causing great worries for the US and Japan. There could be more surveillance flights, more jet fighters being scrambled to check out planes that have not identified themselves to China. And China hasn't ruled out putting that in the South China Sea either. If China creates one of those air defence zones in the South China Sea, it's going to further rise tensions. Then as the year progresses, we're expecting to see more oil exploration activity, potentially in disputed waters off Vietnam. China's objected to this in the past. It's physically interfered with ships during exploration, cutting cables and so on. There's some worry that if that increases, particularly in the first quarter, as we see calm weather in that area, that things could move in that direction again. It's fair to say that the tensions seem to be rising with each passing year and are of greater concern, not just around the region and in Washington, but also increasingly in Europe because of trade flows. The South China Sea is absolutely vital to world trade. Not only does Japan, South Korea, China get the bulk of their oil through the South China Sea, but trade to the rest of the world flows through there as well. So it's a pretty important waterway.
Top story this hour, China's air defense says it will conduct regular air patrol covering a newly established East China Sea Air Defense Identification Zone. Combat aircraft will carry out the patrols to strengthen monitoring of the zone, according to an air defense spokesman. China says the patrol are a defensive measure and fall in line with common international practices. But the spokesman also said Chinese air defense is maintaining the status of high alert and will take appropriate measures to deal with any threat to China's airspace. The announcement follows recent incidents of U.S., Japanese and South Korean planes entering the zone without informing China of flight plans, one of the zone's key requirements. And Chinese patrols of the zone began on Thursday.
As Prime Minister Shinzo Abe enters his second year in the office, Japan's cabinet approved a record-high 95.88 trillion yen, approximately $922 billion budget for fiscal 2014. Amongst increase in the public works project and social security programs, a notable increase was also seen in the defense budget. Defense expenditures will climb 2.8% to 4.88 trillion yen as Japan moves to shift its focus on East China Sea as territorial rows with China continues. This is the first of Tokyo's 5-year defense build-up plan to buy surveillance drone, Osprey aircraft and set up a unit similar to the US Marines. Shinzo Abe's goal to bolster Japan's security and military capabilities has been a hot topic in Japan, as well as inviting criticism from the neighboring countries, although Abe seems to have been subtle on diplomatic moves.
Abe, in this last night's session, he focused on secrecy legislation, got his Security Council in order. He's now expanding the defense guidelines, going to be a modest defense buildup, a reallocation of forces. But it's hard to describe what Abe is doing as hawkish in terms of his diplomacy.
Abe's public support rate once peaked at 70%, but plummeted as he pushed through these national security-related bills.
Japanese voted for what they saw as a powerful leader for Japan's economy, but it does not mean that the people gave approval for bolstering Japan's military.
But potential buildup is apparent. The question that is often asked now is what is next after boosting Japan's defense capability. Abe once said he hopes to upgrade the Japanese defense force to a national defense force, and in his own words, hopes to make even more contribution to international peace and stability, raising concerns of expanding roles of the Japanese defense force. Terence Terashima, CCTV, Tokyo.
And finally, China's first aircraft carrier, the Liaoning, has left its home port in East China's Qingdao City for a training mission in the South China Sea. And this is the first time the carrier has conducted a cross-sea training voyage. According to the Navy, the scheduled training session is aimed at testing the carrier's equipment. The aircraft carrier was escorted by 2 missile destroyers, the Shenyang and the Shijiazhuang, and 2 missile frigates, the Yantai and the Weifang. The Liaoning was commissioned into the Navy last year. Previous training missions have included landing and takeoff drills by J-15 carrier-borne fighter jets.
More exercises in the East China Sea. More training missions for China's first aircraft carrier, the Liaoning. And now, in a bid to strengthen control and monitoring of the area, the People's Liberation Army is shifting its focus from sea to air.
The purpose of East China Sea Air Defense Identification Zone is to safeguard territorial and airspace security. It's also a necessary measure to effectively exercise China's right of self-defense.
The zone was announced on Saturday, but it overlaps with a similar zone operated by Japan for decades. And crucially, both zones cover the disputed Diaoyu Islands. The Army says the key purpose of the zone is purely to identify foreign aircrafts.
The identification zone is not a territorial airspace. It's an area demarcated outside territorial airspace, and to establish an early warning mechanism and ensure our air security. It does not mean the expansion of territorial airspace. It helps to improve the effectiveness of safeguarding China's territorial airspace.
The ministry says the new zone is designed to identify, monitor, control and react based on each situation and any potential threat. But it is believed that the new zone provides a legal basis for military activities around the Diaoyu Islands. The situation over the Diaoyu Island worsened when Japan wanted to purchase the islands and unilaterally changed the status quo over a year ago. The Air Defense Identification Zone is yet another countermeasure taken by China to get better control of the territory. The consequence is now closely watched by all sides, and tension in the East China Sea could continue to rise in the future. Han Bin, CCTV.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.